Dances with Robots, a conversation with Keira Chang.
Keira, thank you for joining us. Can you please give us your name, describe your physical embodiment, and maybe to tell us a little bit about your environment where you're recording today?
Sure. My name is Keira Chang. I am a mixed race Asian-ish person with long brown hair over to one side and an undercut, wearing a white printed button down in a very empty studio apartment.
And hi, I'm Sydney Skybetter, Dean of the curriculum here at Brown University. White dude with Slavic eye circles and a fucked up brown haircut. I don't know why I said those words in that order. Wearing a blue shirt and surrounded by a bunch of books and robots talking into a microphone. So Keira, who are you and what do you do? What are you up to these days?
What am I mostly doing right now? I still work a lot directly producing live and film dance happenings. I also work with producing various digital artists online and in installation format. I am a photographer, a newly ceramics and woodworking artist, metalsmith, and bus builder. But
No particular order.
But largely, I continue to facilitate art practice and process, largely either in or between dance and technology.
Okay. So then, can you remind me? We've known each other for, I'm going to say, approaching 20 years, I think. Can you remind me? I think we met, you were working with Kate Weare. This would have been like the early to mid 2000s, I want to say. Do you remember how we met?
I think I had been stalking you for some time before we officially met. And
get in line, sure.
you were talking on a panel, the only panel, as it were, at the time, where anyone had the audacity to suggest that dance and technology had anything to do with one another. And at that time, you were only the second dance maker / legit coder programmer that I had heard of. So I was like, I'm there.
Well, so that brings me maybe to my next question. So, I mean, how did you start thinking about the relationship, let alone proficiency, across dance and technology? It's like, what are these things individually, and how did you start relating the two of them?
Well, I think that took quite a long time. I'd been sort of practicing both very separately. I'd been, training and dancing since I had been 3, and just sort of a self-taught programmer, maybe since college or a little bit before that. But it wasn't really until the time when we all started to interact and meet that these even suggested that there could be a correlation or relationship. I guess I had first started just applying things on a practical sense rather than a creative sense, working with a lot of artists who don't have a handle on their own, tech and business setup of things is a real problem. And just being able,
well, it's challenging. It's not, just a caveat for our listeners that Keira is not condescending to artists as a category, but rather indicating the challenges latent to these fields.
And as I approach most things, see a problem, I can write a program that will solve that. So that's sort of where it started. But it wasn't until the proto-Circes that it became a notion to me that creatively these could be mixed.
Well, so let's go to the proto-Circe, and I love that framing. Actually, I think it's more accurate than kitchen clutch or whatever the fuck I've been calling it. Can you take me back here? Because I know that once you and I had kind of discovered our mutual interest, like I think we were both balancing dance administration and some kind of related fuckery. This would be in 2014, 2015. I
Yes.
know we were working together relative to some producerial shenanigans that required some specific negotiation, but this was in the context of also us like starting to explore like kind of a professionalization, as it were, of a lot of
Yeah.
these concerns. And can you walk back the clock here? Like, how did we start talking about like building our own kind of like matrix or community for these kinds of conversations? Because I know like you and I were already tied into a number of different interlocking communities that were occasionally preoccupied with these kinds of questions.
Yeah.
But like, how did we do it, Kira?
It seems a bit vague and mystical at this point, looking back.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, this is our chance to mythologize. Let's set the record how we want it. You know.
it felt very much like a Brooklyn hipster, like basement. I know a guy who knows a guy kind of situation. No way, really?
Yeah.
So it was kind of it was just kind of a gathering of, it felt like almost one person at a time being magnetized into this conversation, and a lot of sort of one-off you know, coffees, beers, etc. being had, where I think that one of the biggest things that I remember talking about in that time was this sense of unutilized opportunity or potential that we felt, sort of being able to sit in a sphere with a view towards both the dance and embodied world and the potential and attached financial resources within the technology world, and trying to imagine opportunities for more crossover, more growth, more resource sharing. And I think that the people who were excited about those collaborations and being able to disrupt their own practices were the people who naturally, one by one, sort of came into that um, conversation, until we reached this critical mass where you suggested, well, maybe we should have a party about this.
Sure. As all great discourse starts.
Yeah, and I think it was very much like, can you drive a van on this date after that?
Well, so let me ask one quick sort of follow-up question before we get to the
Yeah.
van and the partying and the drinking. So we've been talking with folks trying to reconstruct this because my memory is hazy as hell here. Like I was a recent father, and like I don't remember so much of so many things about this time. But like a number of the folks we have spoken with had very different kinds of catalytic projects that they were particularly interested in pursuing.
Yeah.
We had a lot of people who were like specifically interested, and this was like Kevin Clark and I, like we're just trying to get dancers jobs.
Yes.
Like we're in a recessionary environment, like let's just figure out how to get the money so we can keep doing the art. Then there's some other folks maybe coming more from the technology side who are like, what are the like untapped possibilities of the interface of the technology and the dance? And then even further, there's like questions like specific interface modalities that we were talking about relative to the Apple Watch or
Mhm.
similar. What was there like a particular kind of like opportunity or problem set that was like particularly interesting to you or galvanizing to you? Or was it just like
Um,
nerds,
I mean,
fun
for sure
nerds?
nerds. But also, I think that s- still, possibly, the dance world tends to sit very much in a mindset of scarcity, not just when it comes to funds, but also when it comes to understanding and valuing, not just in a niche dance world way, but in a world view way, their own expertise and skill set. I think that we we put that on ourselves quite a lot, that we are sort of the ugly stepsister of the arts, you know. We are the realm of art making and performance that typically has the smallest budgets. We're not jazz, we're not opera, we're not theater. And somehow this accepted identity means that dance makers tend not to imagine themselves having an expertise that would be of high value to a field outside of the dance bubble. And it really struck me that as we were talking about the way that technology is shaping our bodies and is being choreographed by people who have honestly no expertise in general around these things, that not only is there a value to an expertise like this, but a desperate need. And to me, that just, it seemed like it was just a moment that I thought, oh my gosh, we could see each other and see ourselves differently in this lens. I don't know how far we've gone with that, but I was very excited and inspired by that moment of realization.
That was beautifully put, and I completely agree with you. It's like now looking back, however many years, like I do kind of wonder, like I see where we all have landed individually. Like I see how our discourse has evolved over time, but like the tectonics of the industry and of where we are in capitalism or whatever, like it feels so insurmountable sometimes. Um, and yet there's a van. So I want to go back to the specific moment, right? So we're like, okay, we should like have a gaggle about this. Um, can you walk us through the conversations here? Like, did I ask you to get a van? Did you volunteer to get a van? And am I remembering correctly? You got this van from like that West Side place
CC Rentals,
with yeah,
the infamous CC
yeah,
Rentals,
yes,
where
yes,
all good dance and theater production people rent their extremely
yeah.
sketchy vehicles
Where,
from.
where all good theater starts and stops.
Absolutely.
Really,
Absolutely. No questions asked. You want 17-foot
my
box
God.
truck? Here you go.
Here's your truck. Enjoy truck.
Um, I feel like as the list, like there was a contingent obviously in Providence already that you uh were working with and talking with Stefan and Nadav. Isn't Nadav from Providence?
Nadav.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's at Connecticut College but lives in Providence.
Yeah. And as the New York contingent started to grow and I realized a regular rental wasn't going to do the job, I, I did what needed to be done. And
So you're not just gonna like take an S class to Providence.
yeah,
You're gonna do it
no.
right. CC rental.
And with the very anonymous email chain of a bunch of people I had never heard of, telling them to meet me on West 10th Street and 39th at 9 in the morning was basically, yeah. And we said our hellos there for the first time for the most part.
How was that hello moment? So like there was obviously there was some coordinating. You trusted me, and thank you for this, to like meet on the West Side with a bunch of nerds you didn't know, to rent a van from a sketchy place. What was it like saying hello to these nerds? What was the van ride like? Like what was that situation? Because I was never present there, obviously. So like walk us through that.
Yeah, I mean, I was driving, therefore
Yeah.
very professionally focused on the road. But
Yes, of
I
course.
think that all of those sort of synergies of, oh, you're working on this with this person, and it was the loudest nonstop, oh my God, conversation kind of the whole way there, as people realized sort of that they kind of knew somebody or they had seen a project that somebody else had worked on. And there was a lot of connecting of dots that had maybe only been in the sort of passive awareness before. Um, so by the time we got there, in the afternoon sometime, I feel like we were all fast friends already. It was such a kind of a relief in a way to feel like you were meeting people from your tribe, really from your tribe. Not just kind of like, oh, this is the 1/4 of my stuff that you're going to understand. So I'm going to give you this and I'll just keep all the scary stuff away. And then this other person's going to get like an 1/8 and then they don't need to know about the rest. But it felt like such a fluid conversation where you could be your full weird self and folks there could talk about every aspect from the very creative to the very technical, and everybody had something that someone didn't know about before. It was just really catalyzing.
Awesome. So to go back to the TikTok then, so you meet a bunch of nerds on the West Side. You get in a van that smells like um, other people. You drive to Providence, other people and their life choices, let's say. You drive to Providence. You have a rambunctious time, and then you get out of the van. You've arrived at the Pawtucket, Rhode Island. What next? What do you remember about this first gathering um, from the van on through? What's next?
Um, I remember just thinking how different real estate is in Providence. Because the
Uh-huh.
palatial, Stefan's palatial, huge apartment with exposed brick and all this stuff cost less than my 1 bedroom in Brooklyn. But that there was this super long table with sort of maybe little tables tacked onto it that became um, the farthest thing from like a conference table, but in the shape of a conference table that you could possibly imagine. Everyone just trying to figure out who the new people that are being added to the mix, like the Providence locals. And I don't remember what we were eating, but I remember that there was food and drink. And just knowing that whoever you were going to turn to your left and say, "Hi, who are you?" to next was going to be amazing. Like, no doubt.
I so love you're really capturing, I think, the feel of the social
Yeah.
realm there. I wonder if you recall anything about like literally what we talked about. I mean, I looked at my notes from around this time. It seems like there were like two kind of main planks
Yeah.
that I think we talked through. Like one, like is dance choreography like useful
Yeah.
in talking about emerging technologies, especially surveillance technologies,
Yeah.
and secondly, like is this as much of a cluster as like we seem to think it is? But like I do not remember for the life of me, and this is probably the adrenaline and or the tequila, like how it is that we actually facilitated that conversation. So do you remember what it was like to be in this conversation, like not just in the room with the people, but like do you remember anything about how we talked about all this crap?
Um, it's been a long time. I think
It has.
that what I recall of the flow was a consistent pendulum where we would sort of talk about things that were hopeful and opportunities. And then we'd sort of get to the pinnacle high of that, and then we'd start deconstructing all of the horrible evils that could also possibly come from said thing. And I feel like each time, with each tangible topic, that sort of optimism, and I don't want to call it cynicism, but pragmatism, um, you know, healthy pragmatism, necessary pragmatism,
Sure.
would come into play. I think that when we were talking in particular about the ubiquitous but also somewhat invisible influence of embodied technologies, especially those that were poorly choreographed, sort of on the general populace, that sense of opportunity, that sense of being able to offer expertise came into play. But then I think, understanding the necessities around, is it really to make a better, is the job really to make a better invasive thing? Is that the job, or is it to make the thing not invasive? Like, what are our ethical goals within the realm of what is possible? What should we do within the realm of what is possible, and what should we try to have not happen if we have any, potential to influence that?
So like, what is the nature of the intervention? Do we just like make a better surveillance technology that's like more dancerly, or do we like somehow like put the brakes on the technology that would otherwise support us financially?
Yeah,
Like
it's a pickle.
Keira Chang, it's a pickle. Keira Chang. Um, Sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, because I don't want to say defected, but kind of defected to the outside of dance world artists who are dealing with embodied technology. One of the artists I primarily support and produce is Kyle McDonald, who does a lot of work with machine learning and also, various forms of facial analysis, things like that. And I think that one of the things that I wish we could bring into the dance world was this sufficient fluency to be able to play with the edge of commentary around these problematic technologies. And I think that that is often our downfall. There are, of course, notable exceptions well within the Cerseiverse mostly, but like last year pandemic. At some point
I
in the
know.
recent past, we made an app called Facework that essentially is like a game where you try to match your facial expression to the jobs available, and the facial analysis AI determines whether you are a good candidate for the job. Just to comment on the fact that this is actually happening out there in the world. It sounds like a joke, but it's not. And also, working around the gathering of databases for facial analysis around carceral practices. I think that this work, I don't feel like the dance field is quite ready to interface with the dialogue on that level yet. I don't think they have. Well, not again, exceptions. There's not necessarily the fluency with the technologies to be able to offer commentary yet.
Yeah, no, I want to talk more about fluency. I think that's a really useful kind of uh, noun, I guess, in this context. But also, like, I mean, I think you and I both have this in common. Like, I am similarly like not in and of the dance world really anymore. Like, it's not that I'm like not a choreographer anymore, but like how we define community as a function of expertise, at least for myself, has changed, right? But it, in large part, is a function of my just being tired of like having that same panel over and over again. Dance and technology. We've been doing it not just for 20 years, but for 100 years, and like what I wonder what it says about either the nature of the quote unquote community, dance community, or the nature of the sorts of fluencies that you're talking about. Like what makes that so consternating? Why am I so tired, Keira Chang?
May I remind you that you have reproduced not only once but twice. Um,
It's true.
I'm not as tired.
I always forget that. No, it's gonna say you seem very well rested. Um,
Um,
Keira then goes on to talk about her experience teaching technological fluency to dancers at a prominent company, name omitted for privacy.
the promise and early intention of
Text, the company's digital technology
initiative, there was a moment. There was a moment where access and interest seemed to coalesce, and an opportunity to reach out to the broader dance populace. I tried very hard to teach a lot of entry-level workshops, just teach about conceptual integration and, what technology is out there that to be able to detect, interface, and play with the body. And for a little while, that seemed to be getting some response. And then I realized that the actual definition of technology and the intention of the program was to help dance makers make better marketing videos. And that anything else was woo. Technology is how to use your camera and editing software better. And that's all.
So I want to, I'm going to give myself one last follow-up question on this, and then I want to go back to the van ride home to New York, because I want to capture the arc of that first conference or convening. But before we do that, you're the way that you're narrating these workshops. I was in some kind of advisory capacity. You were actually in the trench, trying to figure out how to get the pedagogy to work. And I'll say this too. I feel like we have this in common. Like for so many years, like I know we've both been like trying to get at the kind of change management work of being like, okay, like when we say technology, we're talking about a capacious, unfolding, forever emergent phenomena, as opposed to you have your G3 Mac tower that helps you run iMovie or whatever. Can you talk a little bit about like how your expertise was wielded in the service of this kind of like workshop-y kind of mode?
Yeah, there was not a lot of existing structure for me to walk into. And so what I ended up doing was trying to create a curriculum, essentially. And parts of it I could fill in on myself, and parts of it I suggested folks who might be able to also flesh out more specifics in other areas. But it seemed to me in the beginning to be without goal or intention. And what I very much wanted to do was to bring goal and intention to that there wasn't just a novelty feel to it, but there was a tangible path for growth and resources. And part of that meant presenting workshops largely at a very entry level, because that's where the broader community would be. Doing a lot of hands-on circuitry, presentations and improvisations to give people a sense to, the main obstacle, I think, is fear of the unknown. And so to present someone with an actual thing that isn't scary, that they can play with like a toy, to bring a sense of play into it, was definitely part of it. And also just to show the broader path when you extrapolate on these essentially resources. They're like any other tech that you might bring into your physical performance practice. The lighting board is a technology. The sound system is a technology. We have untechnologized them to just be the things that are. And so I was hoping to broaden the scope of the definition of what that was. So lots of computer vision demonstrations, lots of wearable circuitry demonstrations with opportunities to play and modify. So always starting with an existing thing that we would modify rather than trying to start from zero. We also did a playful kind of workshop set around teaching programming concepts through through choreography. You would have loved this one, Sydney. So the class was inspired by Swift Playgrounds, which had recently been released. A terrific code teaching app that was headed up by my friend Faisal Jawad at Apple. And basically, you are in a very small maze environment, and you are a turkey drumstick. That don't ask me. I don't know why it's a turkey drumstick.
Sure, okay.
But through commands like move forward 1, turn right 90 degrees, jump, you can step by step create a string of commands that helps your turkey drumstick navigate the world. So we did workshops where we we use the same
No, I mean,
framework
yeah, sure.
to just simplify it, because these ideas of looping and conditionals are already present in, pattern making and choreography. And so to just give a translation, a fluency between a concept you already know and use and the programming terminology for it was something that we did, where everybody wrote dance choreography programs based on the rules and conditions that we set up. And we were all working with like a base phrase. And then they had their programs run by other dancers in the workshop. And then they debugged. So that kind of thing, I think, helped quite a lot with the fear of the unknown aspect, and the idea that this is something I'm already practicing, and this is a viable path. This is something I can do and understand. That was sort of at the best, at the best of it.
No, I mean, I so appreciate that pedagogic stance towards realizable
Yes.
hope. Like it's not like about like techno utopian like um fantasy. It's
But
about
just a little
like
bit.
these are tools. Yeah, well, I mean, technically so. It's like just to get them in the door. Um, so speaking of getting him in the door, so you drive up to Providence. You have this conversation. Um, any other thoughts about the whatever happened in the room before we go to what comes next? Any other recollections at all?
Yeah. I feel like we all had tremendous lists of things and people we were going to pursue out of that. And the idea of continuing to gather the forces was definitely a strong desire, I think, from everyone. I think that knowing that the challenges, the ethical challenges that we were very much aware of, needed to be met on with fluency in force, and also that there was no harm in taking advantage of those opportunities that might occur along the way. Um, yeah, I think that everyone who had made a connection where there was a potential collaboration or a job or just another introduction to be made, I think that those were all very activated as we were all leaving, and, did ultimately stay in touch and still to this day have.
Sydney then asked Keira a question about how to make the CRC community and conversations around dance and emerging technologies more inclusive.
Like, what are some of the qualities of individuals that you'd like to see more of in these kinds of conversations? Or maybe like what are some of the risks of engaging in the emerging technology sphere that like maybe are worth saying out loud?
I think that because, well, when you're sitting inside the dance sphere to answer this question, I think what there is a danger of with the lure and temptation of fiscal uh, solvency that comes with technology is a type of smoke and mirrors opportunism. And I think that doing what you need to do to get funding is lovely. I support that in many, many ways. But I think that you do have a responsibility to do something not just self-serving with those funds. I think that having worked more in the tech end of digital arts recently, the scope on which we talk about money and without concern, like, okay, that's going to run 30 grand for just the equipment. And, then we'll talk about my day rate after that, or what is the creative development grant that goes with that. Um, to to talk about those things with comfort is a luxury that I think the dance world has unfortunately not really had, with few notable exceptions. And while I don't have the super idealistic expansionist hopes that I maybe did at the beginning of the mom ban, where if folks could just see the light, they would come a running. I do feel like we did sort of get to know, we had the opportunity to find each other, the folks who had already self-selected, who had already opted in. We got to connect and have conversations. And I still sit very much on the wish that more invitation could be extended, because while there's not a great an embrace of technology within the dance world as a whole, I also feel like we're at a generational moment where the idea of technology and AI and all of those sorts of things aren't terrifying to dance makers, young dance makers, and that if we start with fluency, then we actually have a much different jumping off place than perhaps in the current generation of dance makers.
I thought that was well met. Thank you for that. But by extension, though, I love this sort of credit where credit's due. Your languaging around an invitation and expanding the invitation. I should say that this was Ariane's idea in terms of turning CRC into a podcast. So like it stops being an exclusive, largely academic event that's housed in a certain place at a specific time, if you could afford to go to there or had access to your van. But instead, a kind of an offering or like a way to engage with this kind of conversation in a much broader and much more literally distributed sense.
I mean, I feel like in momming it to the fullest of momming, I feel like every year I brought a sort of new emerging dance maker who knew no one in New York or anywhere yet. I'm just like,
Totally.
you know what?
Some poor child from Juilliard.
You're just going to get in this van. You're going to come with me for 4 days. You're going to stay in a house with 6 other people, and it's going to be great, and your life will be changed. And, I feel like that was and still is absolutely true. And so I felt like I was on reconnaissance all the time. I'm like, who needs to be here? Who needs to be part of this? Who needs to also find their people? In the same way that, it was for the earliest coffee kitchen collab. But yeah, I think that while this may continue to be a small self-selecting group, making sure that we have the feelers out there to gather up those solo self-selectors who haven't necessarily found their community yet is super important to me.
Yeah. So what do you say to those nerds? To somebody who's interested in learning more about this discourse, who's interested in picking up the kinds of fluency and expertise that you've been narrating so wonderfully through this conversation, like what do you say to them? Like how do you, like what is the nature of that invitation?
I think that no matter if they have the interest, no matter where they're coming from in their past practice or current practice, whatever aspect of it they're looking to add to their pie, they will find a collaborator to help mentor them or just work alongside them within this group. There's every specialty, it seems to me, in some way present. And so that if whether they want to learn or they're good with the practice that they have and they are looking for someone to be part of a work they're producing, or even just to pick the brain of someone, I feel like there's no more generous group of people, and so I sort of interrogate them a little bit about what they've been trying to do, what they're interested in, what work they're aware of or not aware of yet, and then just sort of hopefully point them in a good direction.
Keira Chang, thank you so much.
Brown University's Department of Theater Arts and Performance Studies Conference for Research on Choreographic Interfaces thanks the Marshall Woods Lectureships Foundation of Fine Arts, the Brown Arts Initiative, and the Alfred P. Sloan Foundation for their generous support of this project. DWR, an interview with Keira Chang. Thank you to Keira Chang for spending time nerding out with us. For more info, visit https://spatialk.com. The Circe team: Sydney Skybetter, Circe founder; Ariane Michaud, executive producer; Kate Gao, archivist and producer. Dances with Robots team: Lauren Lawson, accessibility consultant; Megan Hall, podcasting consultant; Kamal Sankram, music commission; Jim Moses, sound editor; Rashika Kartik, student associate. Thank you to TAPS at Brown University: Chris Reddyhan, academic department manager; Alex Nerkin, academic events and facilities manager; Brianne Shaw, communications and audience services manager. Thank you to the Brown Arts Initiative at Brown University: Kira Del Sesto, Sophia LaCava Bohannon, Peter Chanot, Chuan Ju, Nix Bennett, and a huge thank you to Rebecca Rex in the Office of Corporate and Foundation Relations. Thank you to the OnTap podcast for supporting early ideas around this project, and Panel Camp for sending over valuable resources. More info at ontappod.com. More on Circe at https://choreographicinterfaces.org/. Listen to our podcast, Dances with Robots, www.danceswithrobots.org.